Okay, good evening. Welcome to the September 14th, 2015 regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Directors of the Bristol Downtown Development Corporation. First item on the agenda, approval of minutes of previous meetings. I believe we have the minutes from the July 20th, 2015 special meeting. They were circulated by email.
Make a motion to approve.
Any comments, questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda, written communications received by board members.
Madam Chairwoman, I received a communication from Timothy Fury, attorney for the Renaissance Downtown Development Corporation. I brought hard copies, but I can read it in the record if you'd like.
Sure.
And it was distributed to the board this afternoon. Dated 9/14/15, it says, "Dear Dave, pursuant to our conversation this morning, I've spoken to my client and he asked me to email you to provide you the following update prior to our meeting tonight. As of Friday, September 11, 2015, our consultant Brad Scheid had his most recent communication with the point person regarding our Department of Housing pre-development application for $300,000. He was informed that the application was complete, all questions which arose subsequent to the filing of the application have been answered, and the application was forwarded to the Deputy Commissioner's Office for final review and approval. We were originally informed the time frame for the approval process would be between 60 and 90 days, and that time frame is consistent with our current expectations related to our application submitted in late June. We continue to have positive progression with the investor group with whom we have been working. The basic structure of our business relationship has been developed. It is our intent to utilize the pre-development funds to finalize several due diligence items which will put us in a position to complete our business structure with our investment partners and to answer some of the remaining due diligence items the BDDC indicated it would like to have before making a final recommendation of the city's financial participation. Further, we have spent the last several months obtaining an approval of the site plan for the revised Phase 1 consistent with the project being submitted for state funding, which will help with the final application process. Given the progress we have made, we are respectfully asking for your continued support. Brian, Charlie, and I will be there tonight. Very truly yours, Timothy W. Fury.
Any other written communications received by board members? Hearing none. And Dave, can you just make sure Noel gets a copy of that for the record? Okay, next item on the agenda, opening of meeting to members of the public who wish to be heard on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Bristol Downtown Development Corporation. I have a sign-in sheet. Mr. Roos?
Have to stand. Shire S. 53 Lancaster Road. I was at a meeting a few months back, and somebody had brought a list of signatures, which I happen to have, but I didn't bring it. And the conclusion of the meeting, despite the fact that most people were against the development at the current state, somebody misspoke and said that the majority of the people were still for the project, which I think is untrue. So my signatures, none of them are anonymous. And it was a petition that I went around and gathered, or a proclamation, rather. And it stated, whereas the downtown development project relies heavily on public debt to come to fruition. Whereas the Depot Square project was described to the citizens of Bristol as a private investment endeavor. Whereas the development has few commercial business investors, therefore creating few employment opportunities. Whereas the development is predominantly housing. Therefore, it would be resolved that citizens of Bristol demand a public referendum prior to the City of Bristol moving forward with the projects involving public land, subsidies, or public debt to ensure that all residents are aware of the details and risks and allow a public vote by the citizens of Bristol to decide whether or not to pursue such endeavors. And here's the list of names. Mark Merriam from Driftwood Road, Christopher Zink, 70 Melrose Street, Dale Linka, 42 Deerfield, Matthew Zink, 410 Emmett Street, Holly Samard, 451 Jerome Avenue, Roger Nevers, 3 Swanson Drive, Helen McDaby, 1389 Stafford Avenue, Harley Graham, 520 Matthew Street, Hildarga Rosario, 141 Park Street.
Were these signatures submitted at a prior meeting?
No?
They weren't? Can
No.
you submit them as opposed to reading them all?
How about if I just read the names? I don't want to give them up.
I'm not asking you to give them up, I just, if you have pages and pages of them, we're gonna be here all night listening to you read names.
So far, I haven't read names any longer than you have.
Why don't you submit them for the record? Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Kramer?
Yeah, thanks. Jill?
Jennifer?
Jennifer, I am sorry. Jennifer. My name is Frank Kramer. I'm from Bristol. I live on 40 Crescent Drive. And I think you missed your calling. You should have been a medium. You know that? Because, ladies and gentlemen, back in 2009, this woman implored the BDDC. She was a fledgling member, and she implored the BDDC to say, hold on, do not choose Renaissance Downtown until we've looked further into their background, because up until that time, they had no prior success in such a development that they proposed in Renaissance Downtown. Excuse me, I just came over front of my mind. You also said, if I recall correctly, that, hey, let's have more than 2 bidders. This is back in 2000, late 2009, maybe 2010, I can't recall exactly. But I remember at the time you had suggested, hey, normal course of business for any company or corporation when soliciting requests on a bid is more than 2 bidders. But we chose Renaissance with just 2 bidders. Am I correct? Because if I'm not, I'd like to stand corrected. Can anybody speak to that issue? I'm just asking. Was there just 2 bidders? Or
Mr. Kramer, you have the floor. Why don't you just continue? I understand what you're saying, and I think I know where you're going.
Okay.
With it. Why don't you just continue?
You do?
Thank you.
You might be prescient too. Wow. Room full of meetings. I don't mean to be facetious.
No, that's all right.
I'm really asking a basic, simple question. You guys represent the people of Bristol. You do so without any other concern of, for example, special interests or any personal inklings or biases. You make decisions based upon what the people have requested and asked for. Now, you said back in 2009-2010, hey, let's hold on a while. Do you realize it only has gotten worse since 2009 and 10? We're here in 2015, and it's only gotten worse. We still have the same parking lot downtown, okay? These guys haven't come up with the dough. All I'm suggesting is that I know we change. You're a different person than you were in 2009, but I don't think you were that different than you are now. I'm hoping that you're not different than you were then. And finally, I'd just like to suggest that look elsewhere, adamantly and quickly, because time is wasting. We all know that the city of Bristol needs a downtown, a vibrant downtown. And these guys are not the guys to do it. That being said, you also might want to consider, after this event takes place, taking a vacation and dissolving yourself. You don't have to do this anymore, chasing will-o'-the-wisps. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Those are the only people that have signed up on the sheet to speak. Is there anyone else here tonight that wants to be heard? Council members? Mr. Mayor?
I want to read my signatures.
Next item on the agenda, treasurer's report and action on any pending invoices.
I've received 1 invoice for administrative services for Noel Bates for $130. Motion to,
What's the date of the invoice?
oh, I'm sorry, August 16th, 2015.
Can we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Invoices approved. Next item on the agenda, report from Renaissance on the financing, development, and leasing plan and to take any necessary action.
All right. So I think Tim's email somewhat outlined where we're at. I'm happy to answer any additional questions. Maybe I'll just quickly reiterate it a little bit, and then we can, if there's any questions that the board has, happy to answer them. Since July, we submitted the pre-dev app in late June, and since July, we've been in discussions with the state as well as our investors while continuing to progress the site plan approval or reapproval that need to occur for the CHAMP application. I think that we're feeling pretty good. I think we've gotten a lot of good positive indications from the state. They've asked some questions. They've been fairly basic questions, none that would make me feel as though they're not seriously considering our application. I think that alone has been a good thing for our investment team to be able to bring back to the investment group to give them some confidence that the state would have some commitment to this project. We feel good that if the state's willing to commit $300,000 in pre-development funds towards furthering this project in anticipation, obviously they know we're doing this specifically to apply for CHAMP money in the December round if possible. And we feel good that if they're willing to consider and provide us this $300,000 for pre-dev money, that will be in a good position for the final application when it's due in December. So really kind of gearing ourselves up for that. We, as the letter said, we have our structure in place with their investor and the investor group. It will be, your typical kind of sponsor, equity investor arrangement, whereby we would be the development sponsor and they would provide the equity for the deal. We think there's a way that if we can get the pre-development funds in and finalize the construction drawings, we believe we can get to a place where we can perhaps not have a full GMP, a full guaranteed maximum price bid set, but certainly have enough of a construction drawing set that we can all feel good about the current construction estimates and sharpen our pencils a little bit tighter, which will help in finalizing commitments from obviously the investors and if possible the city for the CHAMP's submission in December. It will also allow, we budgeted some funds, we budgeted about $200,000 of that to go towards A&E work, and we budgeted the other $100,000 to go towards other items such as if there's due diligence that the city wants us to do regarding bonding or regarding market studies or further analysis that may need to be done over the coming months, we would be able to utilize those funds. Obviously, you folks know the PDA and that any of this work that gets done, if we were unable to come to a deal, would automatically be handed over to the city, so it would be the city's work product. So we're feeling like we're in a pretty good position to get that funding, and that if we can get that funding and get this work done, both the city and Renaissance will be in a much more informed position to make an ultimate decision, especially considering applying for the CHAMP funds in December. And just lastly, quickly, we got one of the things that we had to do in order to qualify for the CHAMP application in December was to make sure that we have a site plan that actually matches what we're applying for. So the former site plan didn't match what we were applying for. Since we worked together between the beginning of the year and June on altering the building, bringing it down from a 5-story product to a 4-story building, going from 100 units or 140 units residential to 100 units of residential, but keeping the retail at 20,000 square feet approximately. We've had to amend the site plan to take all that into consideration. So we hired CHA again to do the work necessary to amend the site plan. They submitted and it was approved on August 12th. There are some nits and gnats that Charlie's still cleaning up with the department on a staff level, but otherwise we're in a good position to have that site plan approval in place for hopefully the CHAMP submission in December. So I think that gives kind of the major overview and a little bit more detail than the email provided, but we're excited that we're actually making some good progress and we've got some momentum in a positive direction that, despite what many people may say, provides a capital stack that we believe can actually get this project into the ground. It obviously provides for the need to acquire some state financing, and it still would require the need and the the potential commitment from the city to help out and make this project work, as well as obviously an additional amount of private investment that would go into the project. But all in all, I think we've made some good progress over the last 60 days. I'm hoping to hear back from the state within the next 2 weeks. That would be right around the 90-day time frame. If not, I would think that we would hear shortly thereafter. We continue to badger them, if not every couple of days on a weekly basis, and are hoping to get there as soon as possible. They understand the urgency, especially as relates to getting to a December champ submission, and the work that needs to be done. It's all in there, the application that we provided, what we have so far, and that pretty much provides my overview. I'm happy to take any questions.
Ryan, with that 300,000, you have a crystal ball, what percentage that money is gonna be for construction documents, drawings, and submittals, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I know with the CHAMP funding you mentioned before, they'd like to see as much of that complete as possible, the drawings, document. What do you think what's that 300,000 gonna give you? Able for you to get to that point of 80-90% complete?
Sure. We came up with the budget with the architects, so they're comfortable that they can get where they need to get from a drawing set perspective for the CHAMP funding and financing submission in December. So it'll get where we need to get.
Because if I remember correctly, and just reading about it, I know more about CHAMP than I want to know about, but regardless, it's the higher your points are in submissions, the better chances of.
Absolutely, it's a scoring system. You want to be at 70.
That's what scoring system. I couldn't think
Yep,
of it.
and you want to be at 70+% on your drawings, if you can be. We're probably in the 30 or 40 range right now, and the architects are confident that with this financing, we can get to 70+%.
And you mentioned that you should hear something on this 300,000 within the next couple of weeks. Am I
Yes.
correct by what you
Yes.
said?
Yeah,
Okay.
we spoke with the folks, as the letter mentioned, as recently as Friday.
Yeah.
We've been trying to meet with them. Actually, you folks know that we were trying to meet with them over a month ago. It's kind of one of those scenarios where you're just part of the group, but we've certainly been on top of them as much as we possibly can. And all the indications have been positive, all the questions have been positive, and feel pretty good about our opportunity here.
I don't have any other questions right now.
The questions that have been asked, have they sent you written questions? I know we had talked about that you would either get a notice of deficiency that you'd be able to respond to. Did you receive a notice of deficiency?
We only got 3 questions written, and they were actually pretty simple questions. So a question about why is the zoning the way it is? One of the questions was why is Renaissance applying and not the city applying? And we explained the relationship. They don't do a ton of research, so they just kind of read your application. It's very clear that they're not, researching the background of the project or any of that, kind of reading the PDA. It didn't seem that way to me. So they were pretty basic questions that we've always gotten. We've given some verbal feedback on a number of phone calls between Brad and it's Jackie, right? So, yeah. And Jackie. But other than that, like I said, there's 3 written questions that were provided.
Will you submit copies of the questions and your
Sure.
responses to the board?
Sure, they were actually the most recent questions. They were like a week and a half ago. Probably last week. So, yeah, we'll be happy to submit those.
And has there been any discussion with the state about the applicant for the funds not being the counterparty to our contract?
No, it hasn't come up. You haven't heard that, right? No, it's in the.
And where are you on your negotiation with your financing partners for the entity that's actually applied for the funds?
Yeah, so I'm in a position where we've circulated to them, actually at the beginning of July, we circulated to them an initial operating agreement that we thought would work well for this process. It was a sponsor equity developer operating agreement. We went through a couple of their comments on that. We didn't redraft the document, but we know exactly where they stand, and we've been discussing, that structure as something that's amenable to them, which would be, I would be the sponsor, actually potentially joint sponsoring with Pat as the development sponsor, and then they would be coming in as the equity providers. And they're comfortable with that structure. It's a question of, are we gonna get them comfortable with the underwriting, which a lot of that comes down to the construction costs, which I think you've been wondering for quite some time, how accurate can we get with the cost, which was one of the reasons why we wanted to be in a position where we had at least far enough drawings as possible, so that enterprise could really sharpen their pencil as to what the costs are gonna be. And if it's not enterprise and the city wants, the BDC wants somebody else to look at it, that's one of the beauties of having this $300,000, is we could do a little bit of analysis that's paid for, a little bit more detailed analysis on these items. And once we have that in place, then we're all gonna really be a lot more comfortable with the underwriting that we've estimated. That does not mean, obviously, that the city's committed to what we submitted in May, which, is still gonna be required. We're still gonna require some city help with the project, whether it ends up being the full $3 million in infrastructure plus $3.9 million in financing the retail remains to be seen. We'll have to talk about that, but clearly it was rejected in May. We feel comfortable that we have people that want to invest in Bristol, and we feel comfortable that we'll be able to figure out a way to make the project work for the city and the BDC if we're able to honor the state funds.
Who has control of that entity right now?
We do, 100%.
We, the
Renaissance.
downtown.
Yeah.
And if you can't come to agreement, let's say you get the $300,000 granted into that entity, and you
Sure.
can't come to agreement with the financing parties, what happens with the $300,000 in the entity?
Our plan is to be utilizing those funds the day we receive them. We have to work out the structure with the state as to how those funds come in, which will come immediately after we were awarded the funds. The idea is that the money's spent before we actually, figure out that the deal's not working. Because the likelihood in my mind is the deal's less likely to work because of the city's needed city commitment than it is for the investment commitment, so.
But doesn't the state hang on to that $300,000 you submitted invoices to be paid, or is that money transferred in?
It's a loan. I haven't worked out the exact
Okay.
structure of it with them.
We'll get into the weeds on it.
I don't know that answer,
All right.
but as soon as we,
In that first, the first go-around here, the $300,000, is there any mention in that application with the city infusing any money or anything, first go-around?
yes, we had to provide the capital stack, because they have to know that the project has a capital stack. We made it very clear in the application that the city has not committed to any of these
Okay.
funds. We had to do a bunch of other things.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
sure
we
you
had
did.
actually mentioned that our exclusivity would be expiring shortly. We had to mention that our agreement was expiring, none of which obviously helps us with us garnering funds from the state. However, obviously the application had to be put in accurately.
Does your operating agreement only apply to phase 1A or any other phases thereafter?
It actually does, it actually does. But there are discussions about the need to be able to participate in future phases.
Turning back to the operating agreement for a second, does that operating agreement comply with the requirements of the PDA about the ownership structure?
Yes, I think we would still want to get approval from the BDC and from the city, and we would want you to review the pertinent sections to concur with that. But the structure we're talking about is that we would be making the majority of the day-to-day decisions, and then unless something went bad, we would continue to make those decisions. So I think that when it goes bad, what happens type scenario is something that we'd have to discuss with the city and the BDC.
The investors wanted some rights in extreme situations, but generally, because they were a part of some of our initial meetings with the city, they became comfortable with the idea of, we're gonna let you be in control, and if our goals of the ROI are met, we're the investor.
But those specific events you just referenced are going to require an amendment to the PDA, correct? Because that will change the ownership structure.
Well, the PDA is designed, I think, always contemplated that we could have political participants in different phases of the organization, but yes, the final structure would have to be approved by you.
And just so I understand and you've covered this, but I want to make sure there's no confusion. When you talked about the 60 or 90 days for the approval, that's the 60 or 90 days begin to run from the submittal of the application on June 25th. So they're not going to come back to you now that it's on the director's desk and say, we have 60 days now that it hit his desk.
I don't have any control over that, to be honest with you. So,
Okay.
all I have is they have no obligation to a timeline. We immediately, upon submission and prior to submission, peppered them to find out what their typical timeline is. And obviously Brad has some experience in garnering pre-dev money before, so, you know, that was the guidelines we received. And, you know, we do know that it's been passed to the next level, so that's what we have to go by.
And if you know, and I know you don't, maybe, you may have asked Brad this or not, is getting to the deputy commissioner's office, as mentioned in the letter, the final step. He's not gonna come back with other questions, he's looking at a final submission and he either approves it or rejects it.
That's the indication we received, but whether that's gonna actually occur, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the deputy commissioner has the leeway to ask additional questions if they would like to.
And I know we've talked about this ad nauseum in a bunch of meetings, but if you get this pre-development money, the point of the pre-development money is to develop an application that's submitted to CHAMP in
Yes.
December.
Yes.
Could you just outline roughly, and I fully acknowledge it's gonna be very rough, what you think the timeline would be from the submission to CHAMP in December to approval, to what that would mean in terms of going before the bonding commission to, you know, I think one of the questions everybody's gonna ask, and I think we've talked about this at length, is if you submit for CHAMP in December, what does that mean in terms of getting funding and putting shovels in the ground and starting phase one? And again, I know you're going to be giving us a rough estimate.
Sure.
So I'm saying right now, we do not expect if you say it's gonna be 4 months, somebody's gonna put it on a calendar and say 4 months,
Yeah.
that's it. But if you could outline what it would be.
Totally fair, obviously. So what we did was, and I think we were previously asked this question, and between Brad's experience as our consultant and what we knew from the last submission round, the June submission round, what the anticipated dates were, we simply took those dates and extrapolated them out with Brad to reflect December's submission. So we took the June timeline that we had worked on and extrapolated it out to the December timeline. That's the best knowledge that we have. And frankly, I don't have that exact knowledge at the tip of my tongue, but I think you do, so.
Yeah, based on what we knew from the June round and what we learned from Brad, we were expecting somewhere in the 65 to 95 day original review period for CHAMP. So if we were to submit in the December round, it would be approximately 90 days before we had an answer on whether or not we had been funded. And then as we learned from our discussions, that would kick in probably another month to go to the bond commission and have their review and a decision from them, and then probably another month to 6 weeks to actually close on the funding. So we would probably be looking at mid-March for it to be all wrapped up and done in terms of the decision, and then, you know, a month, 2 months after that to get to a closing. Depending on how the bond commission schedules their meetings in the spring, when we review their calendar, they seem to have more regular meetings than in the fall timeline, so that could speed things up a little bit, but I would say probably all said and done something in the 150-day range.
It's December, January, if anything, they'll hold special meetings because of the holidays, believe it or not.
Well, we're not gonna get to the bonding commission until after the DOH.
I'm just saying, but everything gets backed up.
Yeah.
Everything gets backed
Sure.
up. I'm sure.
But we should, after the housing department does their initial review and makes a decision on CHAMP, it becomes logistics at that point. We would have an indication of either we.
You'll have a better indication in plugging in where you might end up at any given time. You're right. But that's the wild card over here, is the bonding commission and the scheduling process.
But having the construction drawings much farther along helps us both with the CHAMP application in a better position, and also helps us with the due diligence necessary and work with the investor and with the city in terms of its contribution to the capital stack. So I would be comfortable with what we're saying
Yeah, I mean, remember, we have to have soft commitments in place for the CHAMP application in December, so we don't really have a choice. You know, you have to basically be there.
What about the application itself for these pre-development funds? Is there a commitment that's needed, a soft commitment, as you put it, for the capital stack?
Not for the pre-dev money, no.
So the state just, by you submitting an application based on the information you
No,
provide?
you have to be to a certain place, like you get more consideration if you have a site plan approved, if you have zoning in place. So they wanna know that you've gotten pretty far down the project line, and that, you know, hey, we've put in a couple $1 million in investment, but we're short of what we need for the CHAMP submission, we need help with this money.
Okay, and what about I just find it bizarre that they would not be getting more into the weeds, so to speak, as for these particulars of the capital stack.
They did
Now,
ask.
we haven't given you an indication that we would be participating.
You're 100% correct.
So what exactly did you put in writing to them when they asked that question, or what did you verbally say to them?
We basically put very similar in writing to them in the application to what we submitted in May to you folks, that capital stack, which would have required, in order to work, a commitment from the city. And we made it very clear in the application that we don't have that commitment. And that we're looking to, that the city's asked a number of questions, including, you know, how solid are you on your investors, and how solid are you on the construction costs, and that we needed this additional funding to get to that point.
And should the city say no, or maybe part of the rest of the capital stack doesn't come through, what's next? What's the game plan on your end?
I don't know that answer today. I think I would have to see who says no and under what circumstances to provide that answer. I do know that we would have a construction set, or pretty close to construction set, a 70-80% drawing set that, you know, would certainly move the project a lot further and a lot closer to getting in the ground than it is, you know, today.
Has Mr. Owens secured the other investors?
I don't know what you mean by secured.
Is he his silent partners?
Yeah. Are
I
they,
mean, they've all been part of these conversations, if that's what you're asking.
have any of them made, last time we talked, there were no commitments to the project, have
Well,
any?
there's no commitment until somebody signs on the dotted line, so.
Are there enough soft commitments, enough people interested to
The
come up with
folks that
that
are
part
involved
of
in
the
these
money?
discussions can have the wherewithal to provide the funds that are necessary, absolutely. If that's what you're asking.
Brian, can we see the application and your answers from the questions from the state and your answers to the state?
Sure, I already provided the application, but I'm happy to provide it again. And,
I think he's asking about the most recent questions that were asked.
yeah,
2 weeks ago.
and the chairwoman just said, and I will definitely provide those 3 questions that were written.
Speaking of which, you mentioned two, what was the third? You said, why zoning,
I don't
why was
remember.
RDT applying and not the city, and then there's a
Do you remember
third?
the third question? I don't remember it off the top of my head.
But you have no problem giving it to us, so.
Of course not.
No, I get you.
Yes, I'm sorry, Tim was just mentioning, we were told that verbally that the answers that were provided in the last set of 3 questions that I'll provide you in writing what they asked and what we responded with were satisfactory to them. To move to the next step.
Being the deputy commissioner's desk.
Can you explain the status of the approval of the site plan by the city?
Site plan, Attorney Tim Fury, the amended site plan for this project as designed and being presented to you has been approved by the City of Bristol Planning and Zoning Commission. It is approved as is normally done with a comment that says to address the remaining staff comments. The remaining staff comments were basically limited to something that is unique to a downtown development project, in that, working with our professionals and Charlie and the city staff, we were able to establish that we met all the detailed fenestration requirements, frontage requirements that are unique only to this zone. But because this is essentially the first project, the other was the first approval, Alan wants us to make sure we're presenting that information on the signed off maps in a certain way. Our staff prepared them one way. Alan's got some ideas how he wants to see the information on the plan. So when people are looking at this during construction, it's easier to figure out. And Charlie's just sorting through with Alan. Okay, we all know it works, now how are we just gonna show it? What's gonna be on? And those of you who've dealt with our planning staff, he's a very detail-oriented guy, and that's great. And we're just getting that information from everybody's mindset into a format. Because the format is important because it's the format that will be used in the future as well. But the plan is approved, it's just a question of putting the information in a different format on the plan so everybody's in agreement with what it looks like.
So, no, Attorney Chair, so like what I remember call housekeeping matters, is that?
It's pure housekeeping, so if the building on the Riverside Avenue has to have 68% glazing, how is that gonna be shown per unit, per distance, per street frontage, in a manner that if you pick up the map, it's being seen in a way that the town staff is comfortable, everybody's looking at the same thing and understands what we meant. So it's just detail.
Tim, so basically the administrative approval is all that's needed. He doesn't have to go back in front of the land use.
No, you don't have to go back to the commission, it's just a question of, label the stop sign and, but we do it all when we submit the final sign-off set, you just put it all together once. And with the summer and vacation schedule, Charlie's been trying to get together with Alan between August 12th and now, just to make sure we're all on the same page. What Alan wants to see on that final set. But it's approved, it's done. There was no appeal, so it's a final approval. It's just a question of submitting the plans to the chairman for signature.
Another question. Do you, can you tell us what the terms of the loan, what the loan are that you applied for?
No, I don't have the exact answer. I have to go over it with the state as soon as they approve the loan. They provide I know that they do provide a non-recourse loan to nonprofits and to municipalities. I don't know what the level of recourse that they will or will not require from us will be, but I have to talk to them about that. We've asked on multiple occasions as to what the terms will be, and we've kind of gotten punted to, let's see if you guys get approved for the money first. But obviously that'll be part of our negotiations with the state, is figuring out how that money's going to be treated.
So they didn't give you any indication, or there's no standard of what the term of the loan would be?
I can ask
the
Brad
interest rate? You don't have that
more.
handy?
I don't have that on hand, but I do know, like I said, that they do provide a combination of recourse and non-recourse loans. And that they do not necessarily go to the bonding commission for these funds, was what I was brought to understand from a timing perspective, because obviously our big concern was, how is this fund appropriate? How are these funds appropriated?
Another question. The applicant for the loan, who are the owners of that? You said that there are owners, and then there are you have certain authorities. Renaissance Downtown has certain authorities. Can you explain who owns the entity that applied for the loan?
Renaissance owns 100% of the entity applied for the loan, so we have all the authorities for that.
Okay.
If we were to receive the loan and we were to move forward with the full submission, likely that LLC would be utilized for our operating agreement with our investors, at which point, certain controls would change.
And you're still putting the operating agreement together?
I have a draft operating agreement in place. It's, and everybody feels good about the direction that we're going. At this point, we'd like to hear the state's, commitment to being part of this project.
And do you have a budget for the use of the funds?
I I do, I don't have it on hand, it was included in the application, but we'll provide you the budget if you want as a
I
carve out.
apologize. We have the application, so.
The application is a big, thick workbook, so if you would like, we could probably pull that piece out and send it to you.
That's
So
okay.
you don't have to sift through it.
And do you have any accrued bills to date that are gonna be paid from that funding?
I don't believe we're allowed to pay accrued bills, I think it's only dollars going forward.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
Charlie, can you pull that piece out and send it to me, or whoever else wants?
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
happy to share it with you.
Yeah, I'm sure you will, yeah.
Just a loose estimate, somewhere between 225 and 250,000 of the 300 were going directly to A&E, and then the rest was going to get cut up into, updating studies and finalizing the operating
All right.
agreement. But I'm
Thanks.
happy to share that with folks.
Okay, moving to the next item on the agenda, discussion of Renaissance application to the Department of Housing for pre-development funds and to take any necessary action. I think we pretty much just covered that unless anyone has anything else. Next item on the agenda, discussion of Renaissance compliance with the terms of the preferred developer agreement and to take any necessary action.
Well, we're here. We have the Seventh Amendment to the Preferred Developer Agreement, and I think as everybody knows, that was drafted with the expectation that there would be a submission for CHAMP funding in June. There were some milestone dates tied to that. Those dates were referred to as a closing date, an extended closing date, a non-governmental closing date. But those were all keyed towards that there would be a submission for government financing in June. The financing approval process would be coming down sometime in September. And that financing was for CHAMP financing or some other similar program so that Renaissance would be able to close on the first parcel before the end of the year. I think from what we've heard, that closing is not going to take place in December. One of the other things contained within the Seventh Amendment to the Preferred Developer Agreement was that if some other milestones weren't met, Renaissance lost its exclusivity to the parcel without any further action by the city parties. And as Jen mentioned in the July meeting, we've announced that that exclusivity has lapsed. And in the interim, Jen also asked me to speak with procurement in the city to talk about what we could do potentially with that parcel if the preferred developer agreement was not going to be fulfilled and how we would go about doing that. I had the opportunity to speak to Roger Rousseau in procurement. He said the parcel is going to have to be dealt with by RFP, request for proposals. So that in a very wide-ranging sense, he said it's going to have to be put out to bid just like it was put out to bid before. Now when I say just like it was put out to bid before, I'm specifically referring to the process. Because Roger said, there's obviously some site planning that had been done, there's some zoning that had been done, but if the city was going to solicit bids, there needed to be a discussion about, was it going to be a bid for the entire parcel? Was it going to be a bid for individual parts of the parcel? Was it going to be a bid that could be chopped up? We are going to bid for the whole parcel, but we're going to bid in 4 parts. So you can select one part and not the entire bid. Logistically, there would have to be a lot of discussions as to how that RFP would be formed before it could go out and to solicit bids. Somewhere along that line, there was a discussion about what the best way to do that is, and that's up for the board to decide. One of the suggestions was that they could put together a working group where certain individuals would work in that group with procurement, with some representatives of the city council. Justin Malley was suggested, for example. Roger, of course, would be involved so that at some point at a later meeting, whether it be in a month or 2 months, that group could come to both the BDDC and the city council with proposals to be considered by the city parties as to how they were going to deal with the parcel if a decision was made that they were not going to go forward with Renaissance. Because again, the initial step, separate from whatever is going on with Renaissance, is that if Renaissance is not going to develop the parcel and another entity is, that entity has to be selected by the request for proposal process.
Ryan, I want to ask you if you've given any thought, what happens if the state says no to the $300,000?
I think we'd want to sit down with you folks right away and discuss what the next steps are possible. You know, we want to be involved in this project. We want to see it get in the ground. I mean, it's more than, it's not about, you know, making money or even making our money back at this time. It's about, you know, all the hard work that all of us have put in over the last 5+ years on this project and getting it done, whether that be getting it done, you know, on my back or getting it done in partnership with somebody else, or if the city, you know, we're comfortable that the city has to explore options. We're not uncomfortable with that, but we'd like to work with those options, and we'd like to figure out a way to all work together to get this project built, which is the most important thing at the end of the day.
Ryan, going back to what I asked you before, the 300,000, optimistic that you should hear something by the middle of October?
I would think so, yes. I would think that would be an outside date, actually.
I'm sorry?
I would think that would actually be an outside time frame.
Okay, outside.
Middle of October, yeah. I mean, they're at 90 days on
Yeah.
June 20,
Yeah.
on September 20th.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. So I'm hoping that they can stick to a schedule, or at least it's close to a schedule.
You've been calling them every other day?
We try very hard without angering people.
Yeah, I
It's
understand.
always that balance.
Does any board member have questions for Attorney Damasio about the process we have to undertake? I think given that situation, and just for planning purposes, I expect that to be a tongue twister, I think we should consider the creation of a subcommittee of a couple of board members to meet with Roger Rousseau and probably Justin Malley, and start thinking about the framework for if we have to go back out with this parcel for a bit. Don't everybody jump up at once.
But I think it's gonna take a while, so I think we should probably get that. It's not gonna be 2 weeks.
Right.
It'll take some time. So I'm in favor of that.
Still have a plan to do.
So I guess I'm soliciting a couple of volunteers. It should be 2 board members. And I would suggest that you work with Attorney Damasio to set up the necessary kickoff meeting with Mr. Russo and probably Mr. Malley, and then plan to at least report back to this board in October as far as process and initial thoughts. And certainly, Councilman Martin, you're welcome to attend that, being that you're an ex officio member of the committee and be a council rep to us in that process.
And I don't know, Madam Chairwoman, if you want to invite the city to join us in that effort and add representatives from the city council if it's so desired to meet with the group as well, so that there's some sort of cohesion between the actions of the 2 city parties.
That is a great idea. Would assume that Councilman Martin could fulfill that, but we can invite the whole council. Everyone, yeah. So,
Jen, when's our October meeting? 13th?
calendar.
The 12th, City Hall is closed, I think, right?
I think that's Columbus
Yeah.
Day, so it would be
The
the
following?
following Monday, which would be, what, the 19th, 18th, 19th? 19th, thanks. So the 19th.
If no, I will not be able to make the 19th meeting, it's our anniversary, so we're going to be away.
Good for you.
And after 38 years, if I told her I'm not going, I'd be
She
sitting,
doesn't want to reschedule.
I'd be sitting here all alone.
Not quite alone.
No, I'd be sitting home. I'd be sitting home all alone. What'd I say, here?
Yes,
Yeah. Home.
Stay here.
Is anyone willing to?
We-
Still be on it.
Just for purposes of the 19th, we may actually have a quorum problem because I'm actually speaking at a conference
So
out of state from the 19th to the 21st. Now that I look at my calendar, it's training in phase, but we'll deal with that when it
All
comes.
right.
In the meantime, I'd like the subcommittee to be totally honest, and no offense, John,
Yeah.
I'd like it to be other than John and I, because we were the last two
That's
subcommittees.
fine, that's fine, I just
So-
know it was,
Yeah, I'll do it.
Joe, we have one,
I'll jump in.
and Kelly, fantastic. Anybody wanna fight him for it?
that's the first time I volunteered for something and I got shot down, great. No, geez. Thank you, Jed.
So, you know, just the initial kickoff, sort of meeting with procurement, meeting with economic development, figuring out a path and a process forward, interfacing with the council, which I would do that through Councilman Martin and any other council members you want to reach out to and figure out where their heads are at in this process.
Before you panic, we try and be as flexible with you guys working and what you have going on as we possibly can within the constraints of getting the city employees to the meetings.
Roger's terrific.
Yeah, Justin's
Definitely.
great
And so is
about that.
Justin.
Yeah, he's very flexible. And I do think you have to do this by formal motion.
By what?
Formal motion.
Somebody has to make a motion.
So I will ask for a motion to create a subcommittee to explore the requirements for an RFP for the downtown property.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on that topic?
Are
Hearing
they gonna be posted meetings? Because there's more than, there's two people. You have to post the meetings and have minutes taken.
No, we've never done our two-person work groups have not been.
It has to be at
There
least,
have been
it has to be a
workshops.
majority of the group.
I see a trend. I see a trend.
I don't
But
mind
it doesn't
making them.
include
I don't,
the rest of this committee.
That's up to them.
I think it'd be a good idea to make it public.
Yeah.
I don't mind making it public
Yeah,
as far
I
as
think
scheduling
it's-
goes. Do you have an issue with
No,
that? Paul?
not at all.
There you go then. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then I guess I will entertain a motion to appoint officially Kelly and Joe to that subcommittee.
So moved.
So quick.
Before you change your mind.
Can I get a second? Any discussion? And certainly you guys should feel free to reach out to every member of the board for questions, support, whatever you need. Okay, and no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations.
And not to just have it too convoluted, a third motion to request the city council be invited to participate with their designated representatives if they desire.
We can take that motion. Anyone want to move it?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? And that motion carries. Okay, we've reached the end of the agenda. Is there any further business to come before us today?
Ryan, you'll let us know as soon as you hear something, I'm sure, right? I don't care
The
what,
moment we know.
I don't care what time of day it is, I don't care how early or late it is.
Listen, your anniversary's coming up, I don't
Don't
want to
worry
miss
about it, even
that.
on that.
For the announcement? Or when you're back?
We may have to, given, we're gonna see if there are gonna be quorum issues with the scheduled date, but most likely, given what we've heard here, we are probably going to have to look to schedule a special meeting sometime in that week in October to make sure we get enough board members here to take any action that they need to.
And Ryan, can I ask when you think you're going to be able to forward those materials to us? Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All done.